Good morning. I said good morning. Wow, the energy was exactly the same. One more try. Third time's a charm, right? Make some noise. All right. Folks, welcome to Industry Week 2023. It is spectacular to have you all here. Welcome to your first session of the week with Phil Englert, Business Development Manager for Global Esports at Ross Video. He'll be talking to you about his prolific career in broadcast production, the esports world, and the incredible Ross Video. Remember, this is your first year for some of you, and some of you, obviously, you've been here before. There is a hashtag, IW23. Get involved. Share your experience with us. The best picture will get a cash prize. Ooh, can I get a who? Can I hear a who in the room? Oh, yes. Fantastic. Folks, you've still got some space in your schedule. I think there's a little window on Friday for you to sign up. And see if you want to sign up to events outside of esports as well. You've got a really jam-packed schedule for the week. I know I've made it so. But please do see if there's anything that is piquing your interest. Get involved in that and connect. You can also check out the previous year's esports and Industry Week talks via the on-demand section of the website, so check it out. But we're here for our guest, our partner from Ross Video. Please welcome Phil Englert.
What's up, everybody? Thank you, Jen. Definitely would not say that my career has been prolific, to say the least, but I've had a lot of fun. I've had a lot of great experiences. So I'm happy to be here. I'm super excited. But before I start gabbing and rambling on about stuff, I think we got a video to roll for you. So go ahead and hit it, guys.
Turn it on.
All right. So that was a banger, I know, music-wise. Always gets me dancing. But ultimately, I just wanted to start things off and kind of give you guys a little introduction, right, to Ross, what we do in the space of esports. I know that you guys, everyone in this room, is going to get your chance to play with our gear, get your hands on it, get creative, and make some cool stuff happen. And ultimately, I'm not going to spend this time just talking about Ross, because I don't think that's what you really want to hear about. I know that when I was in your seat, when I was sitting there as a student, I wanted to hear as much from people who had kind of gone through the path that I had gone through as possible. And maybe I can share, a little bit of my story, a little bit of the path that I've taken, and ultimately kind of maybe through that inspire some of you, or maybe just maybe it'll just be some time for you guys to listen to somebody talk, and who knows, it may be better than Netflix for 1 second. But I've got a short presentation, but I'm not going to spend a lot of time talking on a presentation and having a really corporate-y thing for you guys, because let's be honest, that's not what we're here for. You are the future of esports. You are the future of production. And ultimately, every person in this room has the opportunity to shape storytelling as we know it. and shape the future of storytelling within the gaming space. So it's very exciting. I'm very excited to talk to you. I love speaking to students. Education is one of my favorite parts of the production side. One day I would love to be a professor. So for me, I love teaching. I love passing on any knowledge that I've gained, and I'm still learning every single day. So I'm still a student. So I'd like to just start off by saying that I am still a student of the world, and every day I try to learn as much as I possibly can, whether it be from the barista at the coffee shop, the seagull flying overhead, or peers of mine and mentors of mine. So just wanted to share that little bit before we get going. But now I'm going to share my presentation. We're going to get the boring part out of the way. Maybe it won't be that boring. We'll see. So Ross Esports Solutions. Let's get into it. First off, what does Ross do, I guess, differently? And I think this was really one of the things that brought me to Ross, and this will also kind of segue into who I am and how I got here. We have a vertical markets team at Ross, basically. So Ross is not a product-focused company like a lot of other tech manufacturing companies. We are a solution-focused company. And that is the perfect, and you're seeing the perfect example of it at Confetti. It is a full solution. It is fully capable and fully customizable. And when we designed this with Joe and Jin and Tom and all the team, we designed it in mind so that we could make sure that the students, all of you, had the ability to play with stuff and experiment and have fun, because that's what school is all about. It's really all about playing with tools and finding what you want to say and finding the stories you want to tell. To move things forward is it's the students that are going to carry this forward. It's not necessarily some of the old they've gotten into their comfort zone. If I can share anything of my story, one thing I will share is that so I would never consider myself one of those grizzled old veterans of the industry who is just okay with the status quo, okay with just collecting a paycheck, because what's the fun in that? So at Ross, we have a vertical markets team, right? So we have somebody like myself, a business development manager in each vertical market. So I'm the esports guy. I am the only dedicated esports guy at Ross globally, and that is my goal, and that is my job, is to focus on how Ross products can be utilized within esports and how our solutions can ultimately make the industry a better place. It is my job to go around the world and talk to people and share my stories, share my experience, give advice, help them build the solution of their dreams, just like I helped design and work with the team at Confetti to make what you're sitting in possible. And it honestly was one of my favorite experiences and one of my favorite places to visit. And I can't wait to come back, and I'll be coming back soon. So I'm coming to you live from California right now. It's currently point up. Please hold. Hey, I think I'm back. So,
Want to Phil, you are popping in and out. There was a moment in your talk where you said, if there's one thing I want you to know, and then you cut off.
Have experience, that actually were in the industry, that actually were in the battlefield, and and bringing that ultimately to the industry and to our solutions. So my experience, and by the way, team over there, Jin and team, if there's any technical difficulties, please stop me and we'll fix it before I just keep rambling on. So I'll try to do my best, but yeah, no need to be bashful on that front. Interrupt me, stop me. As you can tell, I'm a pretty informal guy. I like to keep it fun. So from that standpoint, let's just don't be afraid to stop me. But so a little bit about my background. I've been in the broadcast industry, the live production industry, for about 10 years now. Before that, I went to film school. And I was going to become an animator, believe it or not. I was really into stop motion animation. When I was younger, I got really into claymation and things of that nature. Wallace and Gromit and all the old Christmas specials. I loved that stuff as a kid. It was ultimately the most captivating thing I'd ever seen because there was no strings. I loved the Muppets and I love puppets, but ultimately with stop motion, it was true life being given to an inanimate object. And I've chased that down and I taught myself stop motion, and ultimately I felt like this wizard kind of in between frames, creating life and giving birth to these creatures, whatever I wanted them to be, right? I was ultimately kind of playing God in that way, which was great. So I went to film school in California, and I was going to become an animator. I was going to become a director of stop motion films, and I started on that path. And ultimately what happened is I found sound design and I found music composition. And also what I discovered was that the true essence of filmmaking for me was a little bit tainted by, I guess, the official process of being a part of the industry and the official process of making a movie and making an animation and the business side of it. And I found that all of my film projects, the stress of it was ultimately crushing me. It would hang over my head and I would obsess about it. And I couldn't ever escape my projects, right? They were ultimately crushing me. And so I decided that, I don't know if I want to do this path for the rest of my life. Also, the stop motion industry was kind of slowing down. It was a very niche industry, very niche market. There weren't a ton of opportunities. And part of that was stop motion's expensive. It takes a long time to make. So there was only a few houses in Los Angeles that really did stop motion. And I had a few connections in with them, but I ultimately decided when I saw the Lego movie, they can do this with computers now and they can make it look like stop motion. So I didn't really see that excitement anymore. The excitement that I had when it was just me sitting in my basement as a 16-year-old playing with a ball of clay and a camera. So at that point, I pivoted to sound design. I pivoted to post-production sound design for film and TV. I was a Foley artist. I was a sound effects designer. I was a music composer. I was all of those things, and I really enjoyed it. I loved the idea of layering all of these effects to create this world, right? To create this immersive world of the sound design. And but ultimately, I think I got lost again. No, I think I'm still good. Okay. Wow. This Zoom is showing me all kinds of weird stuff, technical difficulties, right? Stuff we all got used to during the pandemic. But anyway, what basically happened was, I fell in love with that idea of sound and building this immersive soundscape and building the world of a film, building the world of a story. And I found video editing to be a little bit limiting for me, this idea of placing one shot before the other. Now, video editing is an art form for sure. And, of course, you can do different composites and different cool effects and things like that. But as soon as I discovered sound, it was like, wow, I can layer in all these birds and all these ambiances. And, I can really create this feeling and this visceral effect. And, I remember learning in one of my classes that you can watch a horror movie, and if you turn the sound off, it's not scary at all, right? The sound and the score is really what gives us that emotion. And I think that was ultimately what I was. This idea of, I was chasing this idea of impacting as many viewers as I possibly could. And that was my goal. So what I found was that I was a sound guy. that was really what the path that I took. Real quick, I do just want to check. Can you guys just message me to make sure my sound's coming through? Because it keeps sure that everything's good on my end. Yep. All right, cool. Thank you. Give me 1 second, guys, and I will get this fixed on my end. Pardon me. Yeah, I'm not on Wi-Fi right now. It's not my internet actually that I'm dropping. It is Zoom keeps changing my my microphone back and forth. So let me just go to my sound settings really quick and just kind of force it in as best as I can here. Bingo. I think I found the issue. Hello, hello. Check, 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 check. All right. This should be better now. Because I went actually and tweaked some settings in my actual sound settings. So just message me, guys, if I start dropping out again, and we'll get it fixed. And everybody out there, very sorry. Apologies for this. I know that it's very frustrating for me to be this far away. I would have loved to have traveled out there myself, but I actually just got back from Indonesia about 2 days ago, and I needed a little bit of rest to get over the jet lag. Anyway, not sure how much you missed of my story, but I'm just going to keep going on because we're just going to keep moving here, and eventually we will get to the point, I guess, of it all. Long story short, I graduated film school with an emphasis in sound design, and I started with 2 first jobs out of film school that were in the industry. One of those was live sports, as you can see here, for the ESPN3 initiative. It was a conference-owned truck, and I basically did not know what I was doing in the live world. I had only done post-production film. I'd done mixing and sound recording for film sets, but I'd never done a live broadcast. So I figured, it's sound. How hard can it be? How different can it be, right? It's all sound. I can figure it out. So I showed up on the day one and had no idea what I was doing. But luckily, it was a group of very young people that were fresh out of school or still in school. And a lot of them didn't know what they were doing. So one guy who I now work with to this day, he's like a brother of mine. He basically taught us all broadcast, and we built this truck. I found myself building a small production truck. I found myself screwing in speakers, into the van and putting in my mixer and figuring out how to do mix minuses and figuring out how to do talkback and IFB and all these things that I didn't know existed before I got that job. The other job I had at that time was I was a sound editor for this really cool zombie podcast called We're Alive. You can go check it out. I think it's still up. And that podcast was basically a radio drama where I was creating this auditory world, and I would just be given all the dialogue and the script. And then I would go through and I would time the dialogue out and build tension and space it out. And then I would put in all the sound effects. I was half the zombies myself, recording myself. I'd do all the Foley, and I'd do a 45-minute episode in 1 week, every week. And I would get paid like $100 pretty much for that episode. It was crazy. But I didn't care because I just wanted opportunities. I wanted to be working, and I needed to pay the rent. So I needed to make money. So I had this live production gig with ESPN. And then I had this zombie podcast gig. Well, I ended up really falling in love with live production. I was an athlete when I was younger. So I loved the idea of working together as a team and everybody having to come together on this event and make magic happen. And, I was running cables and crawling under bleachers and climbing up. So much less stressful to me. It was a different type of stress, right? That live stress it's in the moment. You get that tunnel vision and you just make it happen. But then as soon as the show's done and you wrap everything up, you basically, you're done. You don't have this project that's looming over your head. You're done with it. And that to me I loved that. I loved being able, no matter how bad the day was, no matter how many things went wrong, I loved being able to go home, nurse the wounds. And I knew that I didn't have to deal with that show again. And even if I went back the next day, it was a new day, it was a new broadcast, it was a new show. It looks like I'm cutting out again. Hey, I think I'm cutting out again, guys. Am I right there? Yep. Check. Check.
Hey, Phil. Check 1, 2.
Once. Hello, hello.
Yeah, we can hear you.
You can hear me?
Yes, indeed.
All right. I switched to my backup microphone. Is this going to be okay? I know it's not as good quality as the other one.
You still sound fantastic, Phil.
Great. My apologies.
No sweat. Thank you so much.
Yep. All right. We're gonna forge on here. So I fell in love with broadcast, right? And at that point, I worked my way up, and I became a technical director. I became a director, and I just basically did everything that I possibly could in the realm of sound design or of broadcast. Sorry. And then this fateful day happened, and I'll never forget it. I was sitting on my couch on a Tuesday, as independent contractors often do, and I got a phone call from a friend of mine who said, "Hey, you doing anything today?" I said, "No, I'm just watching cartoons." He said, "All right, well, you want to work?" I said, "Sure, let's go." So I showed up. I thought I was just doing a sub switch of an event, 4 cameras, no big deal. Well, what I showed up to was PUBG PGI 2018 finals in Los Angeles. And I wasn't just doing a sub switch. What I was doing was I was actually one of the observer directors. So I was directing and cutting 4 different observers in the game of PUBG. And my life forever changed that day. The reason I got called in was somebody got food poisoning. And I just happened to pick up my phone, and I just happened to be available, and I happened to say yes. And I showed up, and the next thing I know, I'm flying around the map of PUBG. I've got 4 observers who can be drones, who can get inside the heads of the players. And I'm in a war zone. I'm not the game Warzone, obviously, but I'm in a battlefield. And it was intoxicating. I'll never forget the joy I got from directing that. I had come from college sports where I was lucky if I had one of my camera operators go on a shoulder cam and go handheld. That was like, oh, great. I got a handheld camera. This is awesome. No steady cams, no spider cams, no drones, none of that, right? It was standard sports coverage. And now here I am in a battle covering a war that's happening, and my cameras can switch between modes. I can be drones, they can be flying around, then they can fly into a player and clip in and be right in their head so I can see exactly their perspective. And it was awesome. I was the gold team leader. So we broke it up into teams, gold, black, and white. I was gold team leader. I got the nickname Gold Daddy from one of my observers, which to this day I still get called from time to time. Eventually had to stop that nickname because the HR team was not happy with it when some of the observers were calling me Gold Daddy. But,
it was all right. And I never really asked them to call me it. They just decided to call me it on their own. But I guess I did something right that day because I got a full-time job out of that. So that was Next Generation Esports, which then turned into Esports Engine later on while I was with them. And I got a full-time job working exclusively on Fortnite. They brought me in because they had just gotten Fortnite as their main contract, their main gig. And Epic at the time wanted to figure out how to make Fortnite watchable, to be honest. They wanted to figure out how to crack the code of battle royales. Because as all of you know, with the battle royale, it's an incredibly large map. There's a ton of players and there's a ton of action all happening at one time all over the map. And you have to find a way to tell that story to the viewers, right? You have to find that way to really share that story in a way that is contextual, makes sense, and is ultimately impactful to all the people watching and all the people that care about it. So I was really blessed. I got to work on a team of 3 people, and we would just lock ourselves in a room and we would just figure out how to tell the story of Fortnite. I was the only one with classical film training, so I used a lot of my cinematography knowledge. I used a lot of my storytelling knowledge and just kind of storytelling basics, right? Storytelling 101. And then the other two of my friends that I was paired up with, they were hardcore gamers. You know, they had been in the gaming industry for a few years already, and they were the ones who really kind of helped teach me the gamer culture. I'd always been a gamer. You know, I'll never forget having sleepovers with my friends and playing Halo 2 all night. I always had a Game Boy in my hand when we were on road trips and things like that. And the N64 was obviously a very pivotal system in my childhood. But I'd never really, I guess, considered myself to be part of the gamer culture. I didn't really ever get into online gaming until later. All the gaming I would do was with friends and by myself. So at that, you know, I always loved games, but I'd never really been part of that culture. So my friends at NGE at the time, Next Generation Esports, they brought me in to that culture. They taught me about the gaming world. And ultimately that was very important because we had to understand the community to understand the story and how we were going to tell it. We had to make sure that the story we were telling was authentic, not only to Epic and the game of Fortnite, but it was authentic to the people that loved the game and played the game every day and were the ones watching the broadcast, right? And so we really developed a whole storytelling visual language for the game of Fortnite. And this was all leading up to the Fortnite World Cup. So we worked every single event, every big Fortnite event leading up to the Fortnite World Cup 2019. And we started training a group of observers, which you can see in the photo there. That's the final group of observers. We basically worked and trained a group of observers for an entire year. And that whole time, we were training them and we would give presentations to them and say, you know, this is the correct shot composition. Here's the rule of thirds. You know, we need to have context. So when we come into a fight, you need to show everybody involved in the fight. We can't have any surprises, right? We're going to start on a wide shot and we're going to come in with that wide shot, show who the key players are. And then we're going to push in and we're going to get close. And then we're going to get a POV of a player. We never wanted just to jump to a POV on the other side of the map. Because to the viewer, you lose all impact. You lose all context. You have no idea why that story is important. You have no idea why we jump to that person. Oh, they're shooting. Well, whoop-de-doo. Who are they shooting? What does it matter? Are they about to get third-partied? You know, is there a mismatch? There's all these questions. So we basically worked and we built this communication workflow. We built a way of working with different teams and having those teams organized in different fashions. And we built this hierarchy within the OBS team to make sure that we could cover the game of Fortnite. And we iterated on how the multi-views were designed. We iterated on the size of the multi-views. We designed an entire observer room, which I called OBS Island, where I went and worked with NEP and I fabricated what you see in that photo of the monitors. We fabricated all those pods and those desks. And I told them I need 4 70-inch monitors stacked in a quad, which you guys can see in that top photo there. And the guys looked at me like I was absolutely crazy. Like they were old broadcast guys. They were just like, what are you talking about? Like, you're not gonna be able to cut a show off that. And I said, look, you don't understand the game of Fortnite. You don't understand how many feeds I'm going to be dealing with. And I need to be standing and I need to have This is what I need. I need the layout. And I was still with that layout moving back and forth across all those screens, trying to monitor all the feeds at once. And ultimately, we designed a system where you had a game director and a game producer and an observer director. So the idea was the game director, that was my role. The game director was supposed to be focused on what's happening right now. What am I cutting right now? Which team am I on? Who's fighting? What's in this scene? What cameras do I have? How am I going to be telling this story right now? So we called that more of like focusing on the micro perspective, right? As the game director, you can't focus on the macro perspective because you need to be focused on not missing kills. You need to be focused on every cut you are cutting in the seat of your pants with Fortnite, because back then it was so much building, so it was happening so fast. You couldn't keep up with it if you weren't completely dialed into that micro scene. So then we had the game producer. The game producer was the macro perspective person. They were the person that was looking at the entire map, looking at all the different scenes happening, and basically saying, okay, out of all the observer teams we have, we have this fight happening over here on this side of the map. Then we got this fight happening at Tilted Towers at the time. Over here we got these two fights. And that person was basically deciding for me where I was going to be going next. So I could just completely focus on what was in front of me at that moment. And I could make sure that I was cutting the heck out of that scene that I was focused on in that moment. And then the game producer would tell me, okay, you're going to Charlie team next, because we had Alpha Bravo Charlie Delta team. So he said, all right, you're going to go to Charlie next. So then when that fight was done and I knew that I was done cutting that fight, it was over, they were disengaging, it got stale, whatever it might be, then I'd be looking at Charlie, and then I'd be calling out the transition to go to Charlie team. Now I'm focused on there. Meanwhile, the game producer, he's not even looking at Charlie team anymore. Now he's already looking for the next story. He's focused on the overarching story, all the different leaves that are coming down the river towards us. Then we had the observer director. The observer director was basically focused on the map. The observer director would look at the map, look at where all the teams were going, look at where people that were heading towards other people. And we knew the game so well. We played the game every day. We studied the players. We lived it. So we knew what the players were going to do sometimes before they even knew that they were going to do it. And the observer director would then be moving the teams around the map. So they'd be saying, all right, Alpha team, you're going to go over to Tilted Towers. We got a fight there. Focus on these players. Bravo team, you go here. So ultimately, we had one person moving all the teams, one person then looking at where they were and all the options we had to cut between, telling me which one was going to be the best one, what was coming down the pipe, and ultimately looking at the overall story and crafting that overall story. And then you had me, the crazy guy who was just living the story in that moment, riding every moment as best as I could. And it was amazing. And we got we went to the Fortnite World Cup where Booga won $3 million. And you can see we had a pretty big team, and it was amazing. And we were a well-oiled machine. It's still one of my most proud achievements. It's still one of my proudest shows that I ever worked on. With NG and Esports Engine, I worked on tons of, I just listed a few there, but honestly, I've worked on pretty much every game out there on one capacity or another. Not as closely as with Epic. With Epic, I was working with the devs, and we were actually working with the observer tools and saying, oh, if we could have this feature, then, that would be awesome. And we would ask for features. They would give us features. We were in the play tests, so we would see the things that came out in the game before they came out. Obviously, we were sworn to secrecy, and we had NDAs signed, and we couldn't do any recordings or anything like that. But we were actually in there testing the game and testing the observer elements and seeing, if you release this item, it's going to be OP. So I think it was season 3, maybe it was the winter season where the sword came out, and we told Epic, we were like, this sword is going to be overpowered. Like, you do not want to use this sword. Like, it's not gonna be very fair in the competitive realm. But Epic, they were factoring in a lot of things besides just the esports. They were factoring in their overall viewership and their overall fan base. And the sword was overpowered, and it was awesome. It made for some really cinematic moments where I enjoyed it. I thought it was fun, but yeah, it wasn't as competitively, it wasn't as, didn't have as much competitive integrity as some of the later events did. But we all worked through that. We worked up to the World Cup. It was awesome. And it was amazing. So throughout that process, I coined the phrase, broadcast is like riding a dragon. You either ride it or you get burnt to ash. And all of you, if you've experienced broadcasts, you'll know exactly what I mean. Once you go live, you're riding that dragon. You can't stop. You can't hit pause. You can't, redo. You can't go for another take. You are on that dragon, and some days that dragon is working with you, and it's leaning into the turns, and it's helping you out. Other days that dragon is bucking and kicking the whole way, and you got to work as a team to figure out how to wrangle that thing and ride it onto the glory, ride it through the fields and into the glory realm. So anyway, that's a little phrase that I hope you guys adopt and think of me. Occasionally I have friends message me and say, oh, it was a great dragon ride today, or, oh man, we had a heck of a dragon. But it's something that I think is a really good way to look at broadcast, because it kind of makes it more exciting. And also it takes a little bit of the stress away. And also it lets you know if you really like it, if you love the dragon ride, if you love the wind in your hair, and you love that exhilaration of total focus in that moment and just struggling till the end, but being very proud of the output that you gave and ultimately entertaining the public. That's what broadcast is all about. But I'm most passionate about innovation. And I think that was really special about how I got into esports and being part of the in-game team, where we had that entire in-game team, and I became a manager and the head of the in-game production department. And ultimately I had a team of in-game directors, and we'd deploy them on shows. They would learn the game, they would play the game, they would research the community, they would train the observers for the game, and then they would do the broadcast. And depending on the game, depending on the tools, they would have to develop different storytelling tactics. They'd have to develop different broadcast workflows, sometimes using OBS, sometimes using production gear like Ross or Grass Valley, right? Sometimes just doing everything in the game itself. So it was really dependent on games and each game. And I loved that. I loved how each game is so different. And that was really exciting to be a part of that innovative team where we were 82% of the broadcast. It was not about being on desks and the talent in front of the screen. People were watching esports because they want to watch the gameplay and they want to be impacted. They want to feel something. And it was pretty cool to be on the team that was helping people feel something and ultimately crafting the way that esports will be told for the rest of time. We see a lot of our tactics used in a lot of events, which is really cool to see people taking what others have done and then making it their own and adding to it. That's ultimately the spirit of innovation, and I think that's the spirit of esports, is continually making things better. So we'll probably get back more into some of those stories, but I just want to take a look back through gaming and esports, because a lot of this stuff that I'm going to show you was not around. I was not around for it. I mean, I'm 32 years old, so I was born in 1990. Like, I remember a time before the internet. I remember a time when, to get on the internet, you had to hear this. Like, if someone was on the phone, you couldn't be on the phone and the internet at the same time. So from that standpoint, I definitely grew up with the technology boom and the rise. But this is really where it all began, right? And I'm sure that you guys have history classes about esports and gaming, so I'm not going to spend a ton of time here. But I think it's cool to take a look back and see where we came from, and ultimately find that out of all of these old systems that blew people's minds when they came out. I remember my dad telling me when Pong came out, it like blew his mind. He couldn't believe that he was able to interact with the TV, and it was doing what he wanted it to do, right? And then you have Atari coming out. Then of course the N64, when this came out, I was 8 years old, I think. And I'll never forget, it changed all of my friends' hangouts, because it was nothing but GoldenEye and Mario Kart and all of the great classic N64 games, right? And then you've got, of course, this little guy, which I've got this exact Game Boy sitting right here on my desk. That was the one that I played nonstop Tetris, nonstop Pokemon, and just, I was blown away by the fact that the screen was color and I had it in my hand, because that was before iPhones. That was before any of that stuff, no iPads. So here I was sitting in a car on a road trip, and I was actually able to see a color picture with pretty good definition. I mean, that was mind blowing. And then of course, now we're getting to the consoles of today, right? The PS5s of the world, the new Xboxes. And then of course, the PCs took over, right? These powerful machines that could do things that other consoles couldn't do, and take gaming to that next level. And then the next iteration, of course, which is mobile gaming, which has now made gaming more accessible and has exploded it around the world. So let's take a look. This is a really fun thing. I did a little research a while back to the official birth of esports. And I love this. I think this is one of the best photos, one of my favorite photos ever taken. Boom. This is the birth of esports, folks. This is why we are all here today. It would not have happened without this fateful day, November 1st, 1980, the National Space Invaders Championship, which was televised on broadcast television. And as you can see, they had a ton of people, 10,000 participants. And it was on Atari, it was Space Invaders. And this was the birth of esports as we know it, right? It was thrown together. This was before it really became what it is today. But this is the essence of it. It was taking people that all loved and had the skill for the same game, putting them in a room together and seeing who came out on top, building that powerful narrative that ultimately the fans wanted to see. So pretty amazing. You know, that happened way earlier than you would have thought, right? And then this is really the origin of gaming as I knew it. This is the LAN party, right? This is kind of the birth of modern esports. Was just a bunch of friends in a basement with a bunch of energy drinks and a bunch of chips and Doritos, cables everywhere, duct tape, monitors, TVs, just making it happen, right? Just having fun, all because they had the shared love of gaming and they had their friendship and they wanted to share that with each other. Then you start to get into, wow, esports is real. MLG comes into the scene, right? MLG then becomes esports engine later on. And MLG starts paying people. So here we go. This is one of the first big prize pools in 2005. Jonathan Wendell, Fatality, gets 150 grand, right? That was a ton of money back then. Now, you know, we see prize pools of Booga gets $3 million. All these people are getting millions of dollars. They're getting paid ridiculous amounts of money just to stream on Twitch, even if they're not in an esports competition. But this is a pivotal moment, right? And then we get to the League of Legends Worlds, right? We get to the big, huge premier esports events of today that we all know and love, that many of and if you haven't been to a big scale LAN event, you got to. But even LAN events at Confetti, I mean, you feel that energy, you feel that power, right, of being there, connecting and sharing that energy with the fans. And when you hear those cheers, it makes it real, it makes it special, and it makes it powerful. So let's take a look at gaming today, right? Let's take a look at some numbers because we got to look at some charts, right? Boom. It's growing, folks. Gaming is growing fast. So you all are in the right spot. Your industry is here to stay. We're going to see it change a lot. We're seeing it change every day. But in 2022, we've got up to 3 billion, I think 3.2 billion gamers in the world, right? And they're just projecting that that's going to keep going up. And by 2024, we're going to get up to about 3.5 billion gamers in the world. And then if you look at the markets, they're very large. And Europe, right there, you got all of you're second. Nowhere close to Asia, but hey, that's all right. You're growing fast. And ultimately, the reason that we see this chart look the way it looks is because of mobile gaming. That's right. I mentioned it earlier. I'm sure everyone in this crowd has a video game on their phone. In fact, some of you might be playing that video game right now and tuning me out, which is fine. Ultimately, everyone's a gamer. My mom plays solitaire on her iPad, right, before she goes to bed. Gaming has become so much more accessible now because of this device, because of Wi-Fi, because of 5G. Now, you don't have to have a PC to be a professional gamer. You don't have to even have a hardline internet connection. You just have to have a phone and the skill and the passion to make it happen. So what this has done is this has really brought gaming to many emerging markets, like India, for example. India is booming with gaming because of mobile gaming. And it's interesting because gaming used to be more focused around cities. Because that's where a lot of the technology was. That's where a lot of the infrastructure was. But now that Wi-Fi and 5G are spreading to rural villages, we're seeing these professional gamers pop up out of these places that we never thought was possible. Also now with mobile devices, esports events are more viewable and you can reach much larger audiences. So larger audiences, that means more sponsorship, that means more buzz, more money, blah, 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 blah. Ultimately, whether you love it or you hate it, mobile gaming is growing the gaming industry and ultimately growing esports and giving it even more legitimacy. Now, a lot of my hardcore gamer friends, they're like, mobile gaming, it's not even close to as cool as PC gaming. It doesn't take as much skill and the games aren't as intricate. And yeah, that might be the case. But realistically, the most viewed event in esports history was in 2021, I believe, and it was Free Fire in Singapore. And I think it had over like 5 million concurrent viewers. That means they were all viewing at one time instead of just like going back and rewatching it. Who knows how many rewatches they had. So from that standpoint, mobile gaming is here. Mobile gaming is making a big splash. And ultimately, I think it's going to continue driving the whole gaming industry up. And there will always be a place for the PC gamers. There will always be a place for the console gamers. But mobile gaming, I think, is making gaming more accessible. And I'm a big fan of that because I want to get as many gamers in the world as possible. I want to get as many people connecting over gaming and able to have a story to tell so that all of the people in this room, the storytellers, have good content that we can produce so we can impact people, make people feel things, make people feel a connection and an impact. So let's take a step back, right? Let's go back to more high level ideas of esports. So this is what I like to call the 3 pillars of esports. Now, this is more how I look at it now from, I guess, like the tech development end of working for a tech manufacturer and a software manufacturer is when I was back doing esports, what did I need, right, to run a business? What did I need to be able to cover as many types of esports and as many types of games as I possibly could? So number 1, flexibility. As you can see, the fun little person there is very flexible. They've been doing some yoga, that's for sure. Number 2, scalability. Yes, you need to be able to scale up and down. And number 3, my personal favorite, drum roll, innovation. That's right, folks, innovation. So we're going to take a little closer look into this. Flexibility, right? Why is flexibility so important in games and in esports? Well, as you all know, games are incredibly nuanced and detailed, and they're constantly changing. This is why I had a full-time job at an esports production company only focusing on in-game production, was because there were so many different games out there, and every game had their own lingo, their own characters, their own items, their own abilities. And you have to know what all that is to be able to effectively tell the story. So you have to be able to have a production system that is flexible so that you can build custom workflows per each game that you're going to cover so that you can make sure that you do it justice and that you tell the story. You can always tell when the director does not know the game. You can always tell. And we found that back in the early days of esports, back when I started esports, I'll never forget when we would see, they'd bring in these like hot shot directors who like, oh, this person directed the Emmys and the Golden Globes. And, oh, this is like a Super Bowl director. These bigwig directors they'd pay tons of money for. And these directors would come in, no idea about the game. They had no idea what game it was. And they would try to cover the game. Literally no idea. And they would just fall flat on their faces because they had no idea what they were looking at. They had no idea what was important. They had no idea how to spot those impactful storytelling moments that the audience, of course, wants to see, that the audience needs to see and they see it. But if the director and the game director aren't there to show the audience, they have no idea it's happening, right? Also, a lot of different productions and Confetti was built with this in mind. You all need to be able to cover a bunch of different games. You all need to be able to pivot and have League one day and then go to Valorant the next day. And you need to have a production system that you can flex, that is flexible and that you can make do what you need it to do to tell that story. Also, another thing of flexibility, and this is just broadcast in general, right? This is the Dragon Ride, baby. Anything can happen in a live environment. And the team needs the ability to pivot accordingly. So when you're building your production system, I urge you, what can go wrong, right? Plan for the worst case scenario, build your workflow around that so that you can be flexible. And then one of the last things is developers and distributors often require last minute changes. When you're working with Epic or Riot or whoever it might be, they might approve graphics months before, and then a week before they finally show it to their boss, and their boss goes, what the heck? This is not at all what we want. So then they make you build everything from scratch. So you have to be able to pivot. You have to be ready to go. And also, games are constantly changing. You know, we don't live in the world anymore where you buy a game that comes on a disc, and that game is that game. You know, Halo 2, that is the game that it was. Right now with Halo Infinite, obviously they can add different DLCs and things like that, but that is the point, right? Is games are constantly changing. I'll never forget PAX West 2017. It was my first it was my first Fortnite event, PAX West in Seattle. It's this big gaming convention. It was actually where we discovered Aiden, and we were the ones who found Aiden and Nick Merckx and the whole battle that they had, and we showed that off, and we created Aiden because he waited in line since 4 a.m. to play in that tournament, and that event and the fact that we showed and told his story was what made him famous, and that gave him his career. He's a really cool guy, by the way. But that event, I'll never forget, Epic released an update like the day before or something that none of the pros and none of the players knew about. And they got to this point on the map where all of a sudden gravity went like 50%. So all of a sudden people were just like floating and, and you know, people then were just getting like picked off, or like they were about to get picked off and then they were able to jump away. And the players were friggin' pissed. And I remember afterwards, we're all like standing in the lobby, and the head of esports from Epic comes out, and he basically just tells all the players, all right, everyone listen up. I know that you're not happy with what happened today, but this is the game of Fortnite, and this is going to keep happening. We're going to change things. We're going to shake things up. You need to be ready for anything. You need to be adaptable. And I'll never forget that moment, because in my mind, he was talking to the players, but in reality, he was also talking to the production team. We needed to be ready for anything. We needed to be ready to be flexible. We needed to be ready to change our workflow and our plan the second the game changed, which I mean, it happens a lot, and it happens regularly with updates. Now I think, you know, a lot of games, they really think about that. They think about competitive integrity, especially if they have like a league structure, you know, that is like a built into a regular season. You know, they don't like to make big patches right before a main event, right before a championship, just because it ultimately doesn't make for good entertainment. But you never know. Some companies like Epic, they don't care. They're down to shake things up. They just want to make the game what they want to make it, and they expect the pros to be able to be professionals and handle that. And that goes for the production team as well. So let's get to scalability, right? Same thing with flexibility, except the games, you need to be flexible, but also you need to have a system that's built to scale. So when Joe and Jin and the team at Confetti were building this arena and this program, they thought about this and they said, all right, we want to be able to do big events. We want to be able to do small events. We want to be able to have one arena that feels good no matter what type of event we're doing. And we need to be able to scale, right? We want to have events where, yeah, you want to bring in a team of 10 observers, but then you need to have an event where you just need one observer, right? And that one observer is going to do all the lifting, because maybe it's Hearthstone and all you need to do is just kind of set up the game feed. Maybe you got a backup game feed on another PC, and then the game team's or the in-game team's going to fly in the pips for the picture-in-pictures of the face cams and things like that. So not every game requires the same level of production. Not every game requires the same level of flexibility. And so therefore, when you think about if you ever wanted to build an arena in the future, right? Some of you might decide, I'm going to build an arena. I'm going to build a production truck. I'm going to start my own company. Good on you. Do it. And when you do it, make sure that you build for scalability. You build for the small shows and the big shows, because that is ultimately what's going to open the doors for you professionally to be able to handle all types of events. You'll be able to start small, and then you can scale up and grow from there. Also, just from a business standpoint, right? Esports companies are always looking to maximize revenue, especially because the sponsorship side of the esports productions is still very early in its infancy, and it's still maturing a lot. So from that standpoint, what you see is, Epic, when they do an event, they're always making money. They have a lot of money that they're putting into it. It's a big marketing spend for them, and they pay a production company, right? Or maybe they do it in-house. But ultimately, someone owns the game of Fortnite, right? No one owns the game of football. All of you could grab a coconut and go out in the street later and put 2 cans down and kick it around and play the game of football without paying anybody anything. But you want to play Fortnite, you got to get the Epic server. You got to log in. You got to have an account, right? You got to play the game controlled by the developers. So from that standpoint, companies are always looking for ways to stay as efficient as they can, keep their productions efficient, because they want to make sure that they're making money so they can stay afloat. So having a scalable system is really important, because if you build an arena that you need 20 people to operate it no matter what, that's going to be really hard to keep in business when you have just a small show that really only needs 5 people, but your system is so complex that it can't be operated by one person. It needs to be operated by 20 people. So that's really where scalability comes into business models. And as you all are developing your business models or working for companies that have business models, you'll start to see scalability become, a bigger and bigger part of your thought process, right? And then, same thing, many games require custom workflows and systems and complex workflows. So having a system and having your production unit built for scalability is ultimately going to set you up for success on that front. So finally, we get to innovation, right? Gaming is the most innovative industry in the world, in my opinion. It is an incredibly exciting industry to work for because everybody you meet in gaming and in esports wants to innovate. I've never once started a show where they didn't come to me and say, we want to do something new. We want to do something cool. That's awesome, right? When I started in sports, traditional sports, I'll never forget when I learned the ESPN playbook. Literally, ESPN has a playbook, which literally shot for shot tells you how to cut a certain type of game. So they said, okay, you're doing basketball. This is what you have to do. You're going to go to your high and wide camera whenever the ball goes past half court, because you can't get fancy. You can't cut around to close-ups. You can cut around to close-ups when there's dead balls. But if the ball's in play and it's on the offensive side of the court, you need to be on that high and wide shot. So they build in these rules because the traditional sports world had so much sponsorship money, because it was all televised on linear television, that they had all these ad sponsors and commercials that they had to make sure that the quality was standard across the board. They had to make sure that the broadcast was what the sponsors were paying for. Well, with esports, a lot of it is streamed on Twitch for free. Yeah, you might have some ad sponsors and things like that, but people are used to having low quality productions of streamers, right? Like, so many streamers you see where it's like their bed is just, they have an unmade bed in the back of their frame. Of course, you have other streamers who have a really polished set, really nice production quality, right? But it hasn't been standardized across the board. And I think that's something that everyone who is really passionate about esports wants to see happen. We want to increase what that standard of acceptability is, of what the production can and should look like. And that is ultimately why you all are there learning the way you're learning. You're getting your hands on the production equipment that you will be using when you leave. Or if it's not that production equipment, you'll be using very similar stuff, and it's all professional grade. And you will be able to make sure that every esports production you touch has that quality standard put in there. And another reason that innovation is so important in esports, there's new games coming out every single day, right? I mean, we see new esports pop up pretty regularly. And then we see esports die pretty regularly. That's an interesting part, because as new games come up, you have new storytelling challenges, and it's exciting to be a part of that, because you kind of have to tap in and figure out, all right, well, this game's kind of like this game, but there's these differences. So we have to make sure we capitalize on those differences, because that's really what makes this game special. So anytime you're on a show, think, what makes this game special? Why do I love this game? Why do I love playing this game? Why do people love this game? And then that is ultimately what you want to show off to the fans. You want to make sure you capture that. And that passion that you feel will come through in your storytelling, and ultimately will impact others that are watching your show. So that's another awesome part of esports is just the number of games. You know, when was the last time a new sport was really developed? You know, traditional sports, it's like, all right, cool. You got, you know, we got a handful of them around the world, depends on where you are. Maybe, I mean, pickleball is kind of a new one in America. I'm not sure if that's big over in Europe, but that's kind of popping up, but it's basically just tennis in a small court. So games, you see these new games popping up constantly and new storytelling challenges. Also, technology is rapidly advancing. So you are all seeing technology change on the regular, and from that standpoint, that means storytelling devices and all of the software and all of the hardware that you're using, it's getting faster, it's getting smaller, it's getting cheaper, it's getting more accessible. So making sure that you're on the front edge of technology will just make sure that your storytelling is also innovative. And then of course I put metaverse question mark in there because I just think it's funny. Everyone loves to talk about the metaverse. Most people don't even know what it really is. There's so many different definitions, but that seems to be a big topic of innovation. So now I'm just going to show you guys a map really quick of some of our kind of bigger esports installs. Now, this isn't all of them, but this kind of shows you that it's happening all over the world, and there's a lot of different things happening in the esports space. If you're ever out in Las Vegas, you should totally come see the HyperX Arena. It's a pretty cool arena. It's in the Luxor Hotel. That whole pyramid is not the arena. That's the hotel, the Luxor, but it's in that that pyramid. And then of course there you all are, Confetti Arena, Nottingham, baby, one of my favorite places in the UK. I'm hoping to come out in May and hoping that we can get a nice video filmed of all the awesome stuff you're doing. And also I'm hoping that I can teach an in-game intensive while I'm up there and kind of walk and really get in and get our hands dirty with some in-game production and test some things out and have some fun. But this just kind of gives you an example of I guess the map, as you will. So I'm now going to stop sharing my screen because honestly, I think those are the main slides that are important. I could get into more of just the technology behind it, right? But we're going to have an awesome demo from Brian here in a little bit. So he'll be able to kind of walk you more through the ROS workflow and all the fun things that you all can do when you're developing your own tools and when you're developing your own shows. And my advice is have fun. I have loved working on live productions. I have loved every minute of it. Well, not every minute. There's been some rough shows. One PUBG show, we were live from 11 p.m. till 4 p.m. the next day. And live the whole time. And I had maybe like a few breaks where I could go to the bathroom and shove a sandwich in my face. But you know, esports events are long, and that's one of the reasons that you have to be passionate to be in this industry. You have to be hungry to tell those stories, and you have to love what you're doing. And we all came to this point for some reason or another. You're all in this room for one reason or another, whether you know it or not, whether you know the purpose of it right now, whether you think you know. Things change, everything changes, and there are no accidents, right? To quote Master Oogway from Kung Fu Panda. And I never would have thought that I was going to be in the gaming industry. I never would have thought that I was going to be a storyteller of esports. And it just kind of happened through circumstance. It happened through accident. And one of the best quotes from one of my favorite producers that I used to work with is luck is when preparation meets opportunity. And you all are in that preparation mode right now. You're preparing to go to the industry and make your dreams come true. And when that opportunity comes a knocking, when that door opens, don't be afraid. Saddle up on that dragon, ride it, lean into the turns, and have fun with it. And take a moment every once in a while to take in where you are, because things change. Change is the only universal constant. The person that fears change is the person that fears everything. And the person that embraces change is the person that ultimately has the control of the world in the palm of their hands. So from that standpoint, I'm very excited for all of you. I'm excited for your journey. I'm excited for where you are right now in your journey. And I'm excited to see what you all do with the industry, because it's in your hands, and we're putting it in your hands. I'm old news. It's funny. My exclusive career in esports was about 7 years of actually working on productions and intensely 7 years of development and things like that. Now I'm focusing more on the tools behind it, but I'm jealous of your journey that you are all about to take, and make sure that you have fun while you're at school. Make sure you try weird things. Don't be afraid to push the boundaries, because that's how you actually make magic happen. And that is ultimately how you're going to push the industry forward. You're going to change it, and you're going to make it a better place. You're going to make it a more exciting place. And I will be watching those broadcasts, and I will be a big fan of everything that you all do. And I'm sure that as long as I'm at Ross, I will try everything in my power to give you all opportunities and bring opportunities of learning into your hands. I've been working with Joe to try to get a Piero system in Confetti so that you all can start working with telestration systems. And I'm eager to see all the creative stuff that you all do with it. Dashboard, play with it, make it your own, innovate, and just have fun with it. So I think at this point, I know that interactive stuff sometimes doesn't work remotely, but at this point, I would love to hear from you all. I'd love to hear any questions you have, anything that I can help you with in this moment. I would love to help. I'd love some questions. If not, no worries. We might get a break between our demo, but I'm here to help, and I'm here to answer anything that I can for you all.
Just before we go to questions, everyone, can we show some love for Phil?
I know I got a lot of energy. I know I ramble a lot. So thank you all for paying attention.
Phil,
and thank you for sticking with me.
Then.
Yeah, it was great. It was very nice.
Fantastic. So we're going to open up to the crowd for some questions. Let me see some hands, and I'll point you out. Starting at the front with Becca. Yeah.
Hello. So
Hello.
You spoke a lot about in-game directing for Battle Royales, but I saw on your list that you also worked on the TFT championships. I was wondering if you could give a bit of insight on successful in-game directing for TFT.
Yes, absolutely. TFT is actually the only competitive game that I play at kind of a high level. So I'm really glad you asked me about that, because it's one of my favorite games. I play it on the PC. I've also got my iPad right here. And oftentimes when I'm in corporate meetings, I'm not paying attention and I'm just playing TFT. So I love that game. I think it's absolutely brilliant. And I love the auto battler format. I love the idea of I love just sitting back and watching all my troops go to battle. So this is what we discovered for TFT. When we started TFT, when we started working with Riot, it was very much in the infancy and the game had just come out. Well, actually, all right. So if we're being honest here, right, you had oh no, I'm totally forgetting it. It wasn't Dota Underlords. It was the other one that was like a Dota ripoff. They used the Dota characters. Auto Chess. Thank you. Auto Chess was what ultimately created the format of auto battlers, right? That came out and everyone started going, huh, what's this auto battler thing? This is kind of cool. Like, I like this. This is interesting. It's kind of like chess, but it's also makes you feel like you're in Star Wars, and it's kind of like the Jedi chess where it's like holograms and stuff like that. So then TFT comes out, right? It's like, oh, well, if they can do it with Dota characters, why can't they do it with the League characters? So let's do it. So that comes out, and we go to Riot, and we basically pitch them and say, hey, this is what we do. We have got the in-game team. We figure out how to tell these stories, and we tap into it. Do you have a spectator client? We started asking them all these questions, and they're like, no, we don't have a spectator client. So no, you're not going to get spectator feeds. You're going to have to figure out how to do it without it. So we said, great. We got the gig, and my team and I started working. I was the game director on it. We started working immediately and said, all right, what is really the story? What is I had a mentor back at Next Generation Esports, and this is a traditional sports reference, but I think it's really interesting for esports. He would always say, what is the ball, right? With any esport, what is the ball? What are we following? What really is the difference maker, right? What do we need to see? And when you first look at TFT, you've got 8 people in a lobby, all being paired up randomly, and you might just have the inclination to cut around randomly, right? To cut and show as many people as you possibly can. But then what you end up doing is you end up not being able to see anything. You don't get to see their gameplay. You don't get to actually see their strategy. And you don't really get an idea of what's happening in the overall event, right? So the way that we built it was we built a few transitions. So with in-game production, transitions are everything. Transitions and in-game looks are everything. It really tells the viewer visually what they should expect. So the first thing we made the rule of was we're never going to cut. Not going to do one cut the entire broadcast. Never. We are going to only do either a wipe transition if we really need to get somewhere quick, because when you do a wipe graphic transition in front of the gameplay, that tells the audience, okay, we're leaving this one place and now we're going to a new place, right? So it kind of pulls them out of that moment. Now, if you just cut, oftentimes, if they're not paying attention, they're like, wait, what? Is this a new player perspective? What happened? Where am I? I have no idea what's going on. So we said, all right, wipe is kind of like our fail safe. If I really need to get somewhere, I'm going to wipe there. But ultimately, what we built was a transition where every single matchup that we had, we would go to the player perspective, which had their POV camera, the pip. Sorry, I know you can't see my hands. There we go. Had their pip baked into the corner, right? So we'd go to their perspective, and then we'd see who they were being paired up against. And then we would bring in on the other side, on the top corner, we'd bring in the other player's pip, right? Now, here was the tricky thing, right? We put the pips in the corners of the frame so that we could basically put that entire comp, right? That's what you call when you, I'm sure you guys already know this, but when you take like a gameplay perspective and then you put a picture of a player on it and you put those together and you comp it, that's one source now, right? It's just one source. So we were able to then at that point in this early phase, before there was a spectator client, before we had a lot of the tools which we later developed, we were able to just put that corner of that entire source in, that entire comp. But what you saw as the viewer was just the face cam. Then in that moment, we're on these two players. We're watching this battle happen. We're seeing both of their teams fighting, right? We're seeing both of their face cams. Now we have this moment of decision, and this is where the game producer comes in. The game producer would say, stick with the player we're on. Okay, I would just lose the pip, right? We just lose the other player. They're gone. Or the game producer would say, we're going to go with the opponent. At that point, I would cue the transition to where then that pip in the corner would just slide down. The gameplay is attached because it's a comp. So the whole thing then just slides down. And now we're on this player. So our goal was, unless there was something crazy happening, or unless somebody was like really getting ready to do a crazy rollout and we needed to make sure we were there because they were about to roll all their gold and they were about to just fast roll it and try to get whatever, try to get a 3-star, or try to get whatever champion they needed to complete their comp. We wouldn't really wipe that much. We would really focus on going organically from matchup to matchup. And then we would kind of find our way through it. And ultimately, the way the game works is as people get knocked out, the number of players shrinks, right? You go from 8 to 6 to 4, and then eventually you get to your top 4. And once you get to your top 4, it's very organic for you to be able to just slide between, whether we're staying on this one because we think they're going to win, or this person's got 1 HP. So we want to stay with them because if someone's at 1 HP, you always stay on them. You always stay on the person that has the mismatch or has the disadvantage, because if they die, okay, great. That's what we expected. But if they don't, if they pull a comeback, if they actually pull it off and they do a 1 HP in the dream situation where they win that whole lobby with 1 HP, you better be on that person. And that goes for any game, right? If you've got one person against many, or one person that is greatly disadvantaged, you stick with the one person, because if you miss that hero moment, it's going to feel horrible to the viewers. So anyway, we built that. And then what we also did towards the end game was we had a 2-box. So we would basically be able to go to a 2-box where you got to see 2 different maps, right? So if it was top 4 and we wanted to show both fights happening, you can't really see a lot in a 2-box. So you kind of pick and choose what you're looking at. But what that really did was the 2-box became very powerful towards the end game when positioning was everything, right? When they were able to go look and they knew who they were going to be matched up against, or, basically who are they going to be matched up against. So at that point, we were able to do the 2-box when they were in their planning phase. Then we would go full when the actual fight would be happening. So we'd be seeing them positioning their champions. We'd be seeing what they were doing. And then we'd go full and we'd watch them both from one perspective. That was how we did TFT. Then they came out with the spectator client. They came out with it. Then we couldn't use it for like the first 2 events that it existed because it was buggy as all hell. And then we came out with some other different production techniques where we didn't have to comp the players. We were able to do that in the production switcher. So we were able to add some different graphics in, which made it a little bit better. But funny enough, from the stats side of TFT, the first TFT match, we had a room of admins that literally all had stream decks, 32 button stream decks. And we had developers build basically this system where they were watching one player's feed. Each of them was watching one player's feed. And anytime that player would buy a champion, get an item, put an item on a player, build the item, whatever it might be, they'd be punching it in on the stream deck. And we had this like crazy stream deck build that we had built for it. And then that would then go to a spreadsheet, which would then feed our graphics system so that then we could fly graphics of like, which play, like we could fly a side graphic that would come in from the side and it would have which players had which items. Or we could fly one in that said, here's the main comps that are being run. The funny thing about that is, humans make mistakes. So I'll never forget, we'd be ready to like fly a stat. I'd be like, oh, this is the perfect time. Let's get the item stat ready. Let's get the item graphic ready. I'd start calling for it. And then the head of the admin team would just like chime in on the comms and be like, nope, no, don't take it. Don't take it. And one person had made a mistake, right? One person watching one game feed had made a mistake. And because of that one mistake, all of the statistics were ruined for that entire lobby. So when we got those, it was great. So later on, they got an API. We were able to work with Riot to get that API. Then I ended up handing that project over because I was busy managing people, so I wasn't really able to work on as many shows. But yeah, that's TFT. It's a great game, and I can't wait for the new set.
Phil, we probably need to have a whole lecture from you next time just on TFT because that was rich.
Well, Jin, I've talked to Joe about this, and when I come out in May, I really want to do a true in-game intensive,
oh, that sounds magic.
like a full workshop, and we can just get into we can take a game and we can just pick it apart and figure out how to tell the story and what we've got at our fingertips.
I can see the TFT fans in the house jonesing with the prospect of doing that. I think we've got time for maybe 2 rapid-fire question and answers, or maybe just one. A question and answer. Let me see some hands. Any more questions, folks? We've got one at the front. Luke?
Hi. I was wondering about, because you've worked on Fortnite, and it might be the most hectic game to direct or observe. I was wondering what challenges you faced when you have, 100 stories of players standing on top of each other in the final circle.
Oh yeah, that was nuts.
And how do you deal with who you're spectating? Obviously, you have the people that are poised to win the event. You had like the players that were well known, and so you can look at them at particular times. But how do you know when to go between one of these 50 players that are all standing on top of each other that all could like edit at any point and just drop and start a fight?
Great question. I will try to answer this as quickly as possible. But I could get into another whole hour-long conversation about this. So I'll never forget the first time we actually did a Fortnite broadcast with real professional players. We had done all these. We built the whole production system in this training facility beforehand, and that's where we brought in players and they played. But a lot of times they weren't real professionals. I'll never forget the first time we got to that final circle. There were 60 people alive, and everyone went, holy shit, what do we do? And it took us a while to figure it out. That first event, we didn't figure it out. It took us a few events, and that was one of the things we beat our heads against. So this is what you do, right? You got to figure out what production tools you have at your disposal. So what we designed was a 3-box, because we realized that we needed the ability to, when we get to that craziness, we need to show the context of how many people are alive, where the circle's moving, all the building that's happening, all that movement, right? So we needed to be able to show that. We also wanted to show player perspectives, right? And so what we did was we built this 3-box where basically it was on the left side, and you'll see this if you go watch the last game of the Fortnite World Cup. You'll see that it's one long strip on, so we cut this frame in half. On one side, it's just one wide camera, right? So we trained the observer, okay, you have to keep the circle in the center of the frame at all times. That's your one job, is follow the circle, keep it in the center at all times, because we need to see how many people are alive, where everyone is, and how they're stacking up. Then in the other side of the frame, we had 2 player perspectives, right? And so all we would, when we got to a certain point in the game, we would basically cut around in that, and we would be chasing kill leaders. We would be focusing on people who had the most kills. Format relevancy is always very important for esports, right? Who cares if you're on somebody where if they're not going to be able to win the tournament, if they're already out, don't stay on them. Stay on the people that actually have a chance to win the tournament. Stay on the people that have a story, right? So you're like, oh, we saw this person frag out last game. They had like 9 eliminations in the final circle and ended up clinching it. Like, that's the person you want to be on for a little bit, see if they're going to do it again, right? But then you look for other things, right? This is where that game knowledge comes into play. You look for high ground. Sometimes it's low ground, right? Depending on where the game was in that time. So you look for weapon set, you look for loadout. It's like, oh shit, that guy's got a rocket launcher, so they're probably going to blow stuff up, and all these builds are going to come falling down. Here's the thing, though. We realized that we could only be on that 3 box for a certain amount of time because you lose the impact. You don't quite feel every kill the way you do when it's just full. Like when you have a full player perspective, you're in that person's head, you're in their story, you're riding that journey. So what we realized was we got to a certain point, we would show the 3 box, we would stay on the 3 box for a little bit, probably from like when there was maybe 20 players or 20 players, we'd stay on it maybe down to the final 10 or 8. That was also for the casters, because the casters had no idea what was going on if we stayed on player perspectives, and they didn't have like their own observer feed of just a wide camera, so they would cast off of that 3 box and that the wide angle that we had in there, and then once we got down to a certain number of players, at that point we'd go full. At that point you just go with your instincts. Honestly, that's where I said I learned what the players were going to do before they did it. Like I knew, like you can tell, like you can see who's in it. You can see who's got kind of the eye of the tiger, so to speak. And it's hard. I mean, you're on the seat of your pants. I probably shouldn't say this, so Jin, I'm sorry, but I always say that directing Fortnite is the greatest drug I've ever taken. It is unlike anything I've ever experienced. It is an adrenaline ride. It is just wild. And my brain actually changed throughout the Fortnite journey. The first event I did, I got these horrible migraines from looking at all these flashing lights. By the end of it, I was like a chameleon. My eyes could like go in different directions. So anyway, I hope that answers your question.
Spectacular.
Good question, Luke.
Phil, thank you so much. This was a really eye-opening and incredible experience. I'm sure all the students can resonate with the passion that you are firing out with regards to your engagements in esports and how you've plugged into it over the years. So thank you so much for your time. And once again, folks, let's show some love for Phil.
Thank you. You're the real heroes.
We really, really look forward to welcoming you back in May and seeing you in person and being able to vibe together when you're back here. Thank you so much. So, folks, that is the end of the first talk. What I'm going to recommend is we take around about a half an hour break for yourselves before we plug into the next event. So please be back here no later than 11:10 and catch you in a few moments. Thank you very much. Cheers.